one of the hardest things about pursuing God is the paradox that He is a hurricane who often chooses to speak in a still small voice. I mean, God's wild, and in spite of our best efforts to tame or contain Him in our lives, there's no box big enough or strong enough to do the job. But in the same way that a massive wave is often signaled by very subtle shifts in the waters, God often chooses to announce His moving in ways that are surprisingly subtle, and in ways that we might miss if we don't know how to look, listen, or read the currents. And there are things that blind us to those announcements that God's moving. It's not that God conceals His signals, it's just that there are things that get in our way of seeing them, things that we allow to get in our way. But they're things that we can learn to set aside. We can be free of those things that blind us to God moving in our midst. But the first step is knowing what they are. I wrote How Not to Miss God Moving sort of as an answer to a question that I get asked a lot. Or maybe I should say more as a prelude to that answer. Over the years, I've written and spoken quite a bit about hearing God, but I think we have to be ready to hear God before we can put any of those principles into practice. And I think there are 4 or 5 common things that kind of get in the way that keep people from hearing God and seeing Him move. How Not to Miss God Moving is about understanding what those things are and identifying them in our lives and being set free from their influence. Yeah, this is the Gospels edition. I might eventually write another book that explores the same subject from other stories in the Bible, but I focused on the Gospels in this one because the Gospels are all about Jesus. And Jesus is the clearest sign of God moving. If you couldn't see God moving when Jesus was in front of you, there was something wrong. But that's exactly what happened. I mean, there were people who saw it and there were people who didn't. And so I think the Gospels bring this issue of what causes us to miss God moving into razor-sharp focus. Yeah, this is kind of a fun book for me. It's a little different than any of the projects that I worked on. It's a little more personal, I guess. I mean, I think everything I've written is personal on some level, but this one has a lot more of the whole my God and me story, you know? And I think that's helpful. You know, it's not an academic subject. It's we're all in this together and we've got to figure it out kind of thing. You know, it's also the first book I've ever done that was designed to be used in small groups. I mean, you don't have to read it that way, obviously, but there's some questions and discussion guides that are included to allow small groups to dig into the issues that the book talks about. Yeah, I think my biggest fear is that people are going to see what this book's about and assume that I think that I'm an expert on seeing God move and getting on board, and I'm not. I mean, I can be just as blind as the next guy. I'm not the perfect practitioner, but I think God's taught me some important lessons about this stuff over the years as a Bible scholar and a Jesus chaser. And that's what I hope comes across, not, you know, here's a formula, but, you know, here's some mistakes that we all tend to make, so let's take inventory and make sure we're not making them. You know, we all long for God to move in our lives. The question is whether or not we're ready to see it when it happens.